All right, let's move on to something I think is going to be really quite interesting for everyone. PvP and factions. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions about this. So, first question, what kind of objectives could you imagine for factions to fight over? Creating purpose and incentive for large-scale and long-drawn faction PvP.
I'll point out the first one, which should be obvious to everyone, which is control of resources. Aside from that, we're planning on adding an automatic custom quest system so that automatic as well as custom. So there'll be one generated by the games, and there'll be quests that you can set up yourself so that factions and individuals can make their own quests, and those can be accepted by other players.
That's amazing.
That's just wow. All right,
it's a perfect direction.
Go ahead.
I am so looking forward to that.
Yeah, because we try to do stuff like that now, but you have to sort of set everything up manually, build all the sectors, export them all in the right place, get everyone together, and if it was just all there, and you could even set up custom scripts to run missions or whatever, that's just amazing. It's more than I could have asked for, you know?
It's awesome, man. All right, let's move on to the next one, because I think these all tie in quite well. Could you imagine a world where a faction base would be attackable without making it impossible to maintain awesome bases? If so, how?
Yes, actually this is one that Schema has put a lot of thought into. So I'm just going to read his response because it's far more coherent than I could do on my own. The system is a point system. You get faction points over time for each member that you have in your faction. If a faction member dies, you lose points. Your base will consume faction points based on its size. So the larger it is, the faster it consumes those points. So if your base is too large, what happens is you consume more points than your faction members generate. Now, what happens if the points fall below a certain threshold is that your base becomes attackable, and this way, if no one is online, your base will be safe. While you're actively playing, people can't attack you, they can kill you, and if they kill you guys often enough, your base will become vulnerable, at which point they can start attacking your base and conquering you.
I think this deserves some time from you guys. Let's do a quick comment run. Dalmont, what do you think?
That is absolutely amazing. It gives everybody kind of a reason to coalesce into larger factions and actually ally with each other, and get more players involved and things like that, because there's actually going to be a benefit to it. You know, collective protection. Rather than now, where essentially if you have a server environment, you have 100 scattered factions with one player in them because nobody needs to group together to accomplish anything. It's more of a comment, I guess, than a question, but yeah, A+.
Sounds very, very, very interesting.
I do have one question pertaining to that. This protection by point system, would it apply to only stations designated as a home base or all stations?
I don't know. I think I'll wait a minute for Schema to tell me.
That's one of the beauties, right?
Well, I mean, I could come up with my own ideas, but this is his solution, and he probably already has an answer, so I don't need to make up a solution if he already has one, you know?
Yeah.
Agreed. All right, well, while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and make my own comment, and we'll see if Schema or yourself could come up with a great answer, like you have been so far. What about maybe alliances of factions? Let's say you have like Dalmont's SFW and my EFSF, and we're small factions, but we don't necessarily want to give up our faction itself. Would there be a way to ally factions, not necessarily share the faction points, but somehow make an alliance system between the factions themselves?
Beyond what we currently have.
Right. Maybe like more of an official version. So if you see your faction going to war with, or your allies' faction going to war with somebody, you can say, "Oh, well, it looks like I should be going to war with them too." Or maybe have like a way for one faction in general to say, "Hey, I'm calling all of my allies. We've got problems. I need some help from my allied factions." Now, I realize all this could probably be done through the faction itself, the faction system, individual itself. And if that's the case, and that's the plan, then cool. But just a thought.
All right. So I got a few answers here for you. To be directly answering what you just asked, allies will give bonuses to your faction points, but not as much as your actual members give you. Quests will also give you bonus points towards your faction.
That's
awesome.
Cool, because
it
means that if your members are active, it means if you have a large active community that's all in one faction, you will have loads of points. So I can see that being nice to encourage people to like cooperate.
Agreed.
That being said, just to throw this out here, would a sufficiently large faction or one with enough allies be able to distribute those points out over multiple stations, essentially creating multiple home bases?
Now, this is what I was just going over with him. Requiring the creator of a quest to spend faction points to give that faction point as a reward, that implies that you would have the ability to trade faction points around between factions, whether it be through manipulating the quest or just being a direct, hey, here's some faction points. I don't know what we would go with. It needs to be balanced so that we don't have exploits. Also, he did answer the question previously about other bases won't get invulnerability because that would just be too much.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
All right.
So your home base will be safe, but anything you build beyond that to expand, you're going to have to protect.
And that would be with the faction points, I'm assuming.
No. From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the home base is the only thing that uses faction points for protection. If you build an exterior base, an outpost or something, you're going to have to stick a lot of shield blocks, etc. on it.
It's got to be defended more conventionally.
But it only works when they're online anyway, so if they're offline, it's still invulnerable.
Not the outposts.
No.
No?
Outposts will not have invulnerabilities.
Just the home base.
Only what you designate as your home base, and it is only invulnerable as long as your faction points are enough to pay for the consumption rate of that base. Once it uses more points than you have, then what happens is it becomes vulnerable, and then you can be attacked. This is why if you build a properly sized base for your faction size, it won't ever consume more points than your player base is generating. And since you're all offline, no one can kill your players and cause you to lose points. So your base will remain invulnerable.
Yeah, because I was just worried that you could kill people when you could destroy their base when they're offline, and then kill them all as they log in.
Scheme also pointed out you can always move your home base.
True.
So you can go and be building a huge stronghold way out in the middle of nowhere, right? And then until your faction actually is up to the point where it can support that, it would just be a vulnerable, or rather, it would not be invulnerable. Although I assume if you're making a fortress, it'll have some defenses. But the point is, as soon as it's ready and your faction player count can handle it, you can transfer your home base, and now that new base is now invulnerable.
That makes sense.
Awesome.
And that's something really we can do now.
He also said it's possible to add some section for outposts based on player spending, right? So you could be like, okay, I want to have a secondary base. Maybe it gets a percentage protection. Maybe it gets overall protection. But you would spend extra faction points, maybe at an increased rate, to run that auxiliary base. These are just options that we'll have to talk about and make fit into the balance of the game.
Well, it wouldn't have to be 100% defense that the invulnerability that home bases have. It could be as little as like 10 or 15% extra armor rating or something.
It's fine. This is good. This is all good.
Would this point system also apply to actual ships?
Is it just for the home base? Am I wrong?
I don't see how the point system would apply to ships, except that when you get killed, you lose points. Right. Do you mean like, are you going to have to invest faction points to generate a ship, or is a ship going to cost points to operate?
Yeah, like if you have a base that's relatively small, because you don't have the faction points to it, then there's nothing in the system to stop people from having an absolute Goliath of a ship.
Yeah, but the ship is not invulnerable. It can be shot down.
I suppose.
Sort of like how
slightly off of this, what about points spent to defend a ship that is docked to a station?
So basically, would that cost, if you have a large ship docked to a small station, would it cost more points to defend it while the ship is docked?
I'm going to say that's probably the station will take docked ships into account for its size.
Right.
Like it'll take that increased size of the dock or the mass on it into its calculation for the faction points it uses.
Because the most obvious thing to do is to basically put a 10-block faction home base down and like dock a big ship to it just using enhancers.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't need many faction blocks. It would be pretty much invulnerable. If the turrets still work, that would be a problem on the ship. That is.
That's a fair point.
But hey, we'll see, won't we? I've got every confidence in this. It sounds like a much more all-encompassing strategy to faction permissions, because at the moment it's just used as an anti-griefing tool, to be honest. And this adds a bit of depth to the use of wars and things like, you know.
Yep. All right, I think we've kind of gone through this a lot. Does anybody have any other questions specifically pertaining to this one?
Home base ships. 3 words.
That
would be cool. Actual motherships.
The ability to designate a ship as a home base instead of a station.
If it can't have any weapons or turrets, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that would be...
Do you mean as an invulnerable home base or as the point that you spawn at?
Either or. I think both.
Either or. I think some people don't like stations; they like the idea of a colony ship or something instead. You know.
Well, I don't think it's a great idea to have a ship that's invulnerable flying around. Even if it's unarmed, that can be used as a shield of sorts that can cause some major exploit issues.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Well, then how about as a respawn point?
Yeah, as a respawn point, that would be nice.
The ability to use undetonators on ships.
What if somebody spawned onto the ship whilst it was moving and they weren't automatically in gravity?
Oh, yeah, you just get...
they just spawn and immediately fly through the hull.
Yeah, maybe not such a great idea. It's just people are asking these questions, you know. Was it not on the list?
Alright, Scheme is he's trying to point out that one of the reasons why there is the enhancers work the way they do for docking is because as you increase the enhancer grouping size to add larger ships, you're also increasing the size of the entity that's holding it. This is one of the reasons behind that. As you increase your enhancer groups, your station inherently must be larger.
That actually makes sense. Yeah. Especially with the faction points, because then you would just have a larger station in general, and be using up more faction points.
That being said, with faction points, could we in the future use them to, say, augment existing systems? AMCs are a little bit more powerful if you spend more faction points, or your shields perhaps are a little bit more powerful as a relative bonus, I guess, to members in your faction, sort of a logistical thing.
So you increase the point consumption of your faction, and you get this bonus or that bonus. I imagine that's definitely a possibility. I don't know where we would go with that specifically. I mean, obviously there's lots of ideas. this isn't something I had thought of or had discussed with yet. So, he did say the problem with undetonators on ships is spawning in while the ship's in motion, and you get left behind.
Yeah.
Fair point.
It would be kind of funny though if they were being chased and people just kept spawning and flying through the hull and getting killed over and over again.
You just put a lava block directly behind it.
It would be annoying, but it wouldn't be good, would comical. It would be pretty comical though.
For the ship bonuses, the possibilities, not likely we'll have any weapon bonuses, but there's potential for adding defensive.
So increased shields or armor rating sort of thing then.
Yeah, and in-ship spawning is possible. We'll just have to work on some things that will prevent you from falling through the ship when you spawn.
I have 2 suggestions on that.
Like
Make the
auto-gravity.
undetonator linked to the gravity block.
So auto-gravity.
Yeah, when you spawn, you're automatically put in the gravity of the ship. That's one way.
And a second suggestion that's kind of on the topic of the whole bonus thing. How about a module or a device that you could put on a ship to kind of distribute those as well within a certain radius?
Distribute it, what do you mean?
Kind of like to create an area of effect bubble where you could essentially give your fleet members added shields or added mobility.
I mean, like commands bonuses.
Basically a command ship, if you
Like
will.
gang links.
Support ship
isn't
that
it? That's what they call them.
distributes a bubble out in space, and it applies the effects to all ships that may not be a part of that fleet, but
Buffs and debuffs.
allied to it.
Yeah, or theoretically, it could we could have a logistics thing where they would throw shields, so like we have power drain and power supply beams. That's another potential use of this.
Remote shields.
Yep, except it would be radial versus.
He's saying
Oh.
just simply yes. That's a
That would be
possibility.
interesting. Oh,
That
brilliant.
is
there
awesome.
are,
Excellent.
There are other systems that I've considered setting up that would use the same thing. Other buff effects. So using that to strengthen the same systems or to do it on their own, it's possible, yeah.
Hey, wake up.
I can hear the gears in Delmon's head turning as he's coming up with new ships.
All right, let's save it for the end of this.
Drawing as we speak.
It's the truth, man. It's the truth.
All right, let's move on to the next question. I'm glad we got a lot of that out. That's really, really cool. Would it be possible to have a utility that records the most recent date that a faction member logs into the server, so that if they play at odd hours and you never see them, you're not gonna boot them from the faction or kick them from the server, so that you have an idea of when they've been in?
Yes. We can definitely put that in. It's just one of those little quality of life fixes that there's hundreds of, and in time they will all be gotten to.
Best answer ever, right? All right, and now this one I can attest to it being in the pre-build, but we're going to go ahead and ask it anyway. Will there be a way to declare war on a certain rogue member of a faction, as opposed to being at war with the entire faction for the wrongdoings of just one person?
Yes, and like you said, it's already in the pre-build. What I don't know is if this works like a... do they have to be in a faction? Can you just declare war on any one person?
I think we're going to have to do a testing live stream then, pretty soon.
I'm pretty sure that is how it is in the pre-build, that you can just pick one person and declare war on them.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do some testing later on a dev build test live stream sort of thing.
He said the attack neutral option now works this way as well. It won't set it to attack all neutrals. It'll just do the one you're currently targeting.
Cool.
And you can declare war on a single player, so yes.
Awesome. All right, and I think the last one in this section is, will there be other types of viewpoints in Starmade, like a dog fighting perspective or a capital ship perspective, like i.e. EVE Online?
I'm going to assume that this question is referring to, say, like you push a hotkey and it puts you on a chase cam, or it puts you in an orbital cam, things like that. And I guess the shorter answer is, again, just yes. That's
again,
something
the
that
greatest...
we're looking to add in. But also, again, it's another one of those quality of life things, and it's going to be bumped lower on the priorities than things like getting the engine running.
All right.
But yeah, that'll be included.
Best answer ever. All right, we're at the end of this section. Any comments from the peanut gallery? Oh, from our esteemed guests. That's the one.
Say what?
Nothing.
That sounded so reversed.
What's been said cannot be unsaid, Ryben. Don't try and keep yourself.
No, but Delmont, you have anything to add?
Actually, I think there was one question that we had that we didn't get to ask, so I'll just go ahead and throw that out there now. We were doing, do you think it will be possible to create a near completely clean PvP experience? Or will we always have to live with some amount of random teleportation and clunkiness? Didn't we run that?
Not regarding lag?
Yeah, like more, not server latency or ping or anything like that. I'm saying in engine. It seems that we're definitely well on our way already.
There's limitations to what the game can do. If you have 100 people into the game with capital ships with 6, turrets each, you're going to have issues. That's just the nature of what simulations do. We hope to get it as versatile as we possibly can, but I mean it's never going to be perfect where you can just do anything you want. Another of the limitations that comes up is not the program, but the player's computer or the server.
Awesome.
All right. Do we have any other anything else from you, Tom or Delmont?
I think that covers it for me.
I've got something.
Go for it, Apex.
Along the lines of the whole waging war on an individual player thing, will there ever be sort of an integrated bounty system?
I imagine being able to wage war on a single player in combination with the quest system, that you could easily set up bounties.
That's a very good point.
So set quest, kill player, reward 30 jillion credits.
Or faction points. I might actually be tempted to go bounty hunting if I get faction points for it.
But if I'm not the sort of player that has a home base, that's the problem.
Well, there's no reason that you can't set it to reward credits or faction points.
Okay.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, no worries. Because I think introducing a new system of faction points would be really cool, but it adds depth to the game where some people would want it. But I know there are casual players that it's just going to really mean nothing to them because they play in single player and no one's ever going to attack their home base. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know it's difficult because you've got to find a balance for everyone, and it's kind of hard because you could be damned if you do and damned if you don't, you know?
It's possible to set it up so that the game gives you an option to choose between faction points and credits as well. I mean, things like that, it's just, add in a couple of lines here.
Yeah, like with buy for blocks.
Yeah.
Cool.
I also forgot to mention the faction system is based off of the let me drag it up here so I actually get the right one. I'll have to look it up while we're going over other stuff, but he based the faction system on some of the stuff that we've seen from the Minecraft mods, what people like having.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Follow the leader and take their idea, take the best ideas, and integrate them somehow into how we do things. I like that.
He said it was partly inspired by the faction plugin that people enjoy on Minecraft.
And if I may say so, you guys did it better. And it sounds
Hey,
like
you know,
Our take on it will be good.
In 5 years, there'll be some game around, and they'll see something we did, and they'll improve upon it, and they'll do it better. That's just how that's what games do.
That's very true.
What about territorial space? Like, would there ever be some sort of system whereby if you enter another faction's space, that faction is alerted? Such as player brackets in, or ship in brackets player name has entered your sector number. In the same way that the little warnings come up on the top right hand side. That's just the thought I had.
Yeah, sorry. There's sensors, like how your radar works right now. We're looking at expanding that to have sensors, jammers. You can make a satellite that'll have sensors put on it, and if someone comes in range, in the sector, that satellite can pick it up, and it can send your faction a signal or warnings, or it can activate your defenses if they don't leave within a certain amount of time. Things like that. It should all be possible.
Would it be able to issue the warning as well, saying you were in so-and-so's territory, leave now or be fired upon?
I would think the Lua would be able to handle that sort of thing. I don't actually know. Also, he's the way he said. Oh, sorry. Another thing involving the size of your faction and how long it's been around is there actually possibly will be faction territories, and as your home base expands and as it's been established for a period of time, your territory will expand out from your home sector, and depending on what the level of that territory conquest is or how far out it is, you'll have different options on what you can do with things like sensors.
Sounds pretty cool.
Good enough for me.
And we can.
So you would have border sectors, and then you might have core sectors, and you can use, some high tech, defensive stuff inside your core sectors. But out on the border sectors, you might not even be able to have scanners out there.
That makes perfect sense, actually.
That's what they're aiming for. All right, I think that actually ties in with this next section pretty well, talking about sensor buoys and maybe firing upon people that come in.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Well, one last thing, just because he's throwing stuff at me. I forget to mention stuff. The territories will also, if you have territory, right? So as you build your base and your territory expands, pirate spawning within that is reduced or prevented. So as you expand your territory, you're building up a safe zone for your faction where you won't have pirates coming after you.
Now that is
an idea on that, actually. Sorry to cut you off there, Ryben.
Go ahead.
Instead of, say, pirates spawning within your territory, the faction is able to designate a single or even a small number of ships to spawn instead as, say, faction guard.
I would imagine that would be possible. There might be something obvious like you have to spend faction points per AI ship that's generated.
Right.
So if you try and generate too many or too large of a ship, you're going to run out of points, and now your home base is vulnerable. Also, there's a risk to the same thing, which is if players destroy your AIs and your faction is set to replace them automatically, people could burn through your faction points even while you're offline. So there's options there. There's things we can set up as inherent risks. I don't know if we would include that, but you could go both ways with it. It might be a risk you could take. It might be something that you could safely do.
Okay. I like that, and I actually have not this next section, but the section after that, I'll definitely have a question there, and I think it'll tie in really well. That being said, no offense to everybody else, but I think we're going to end up basically revisiting this in not this next section, but the one after that. But I think we should get to the section that a lot of people seem to be crying out for in the chat.